With the NFL season right around the corner, I thought what better idea than to do a little bit of a different video today and give you guys my 2024-25 NFL predictions. I spent about like an hour last night going through every single NFL game on the schedule this year, figuring out every team's record, then figuring out which seed each team would be, and making my own playoff bracket, determining each winner and determining all of the awards for the season. Before we get into the video, make sure you're subscribed and make sure you send me a DM on Instagram of a screenshot of you being within the first 1,000 subscribers to enter a giveaway for a free NFL jersey. When we hit 1,000, we're going to announce a winner, and it's that easy. I'll put my Instagram at the top of the screen right now. There'll also be a link in the description that you can click on. It is literally that easy, and you'll have a chance to win a free NFL jersey of your choice. With all that out of the way, let's get into these predictions, starting off with none other than the NFC North. Shout out the Vikings. RIP JJ McCarthy, makes me so depressed. But I do have the Packers winning the NFC North at 11-6. Packers got very hot at the end of the season last year, even went on to destroy the Cowboys in a playoff game, and I think they only got better. I think Jordan Love is in a pretty good situation. I think he doesn't have like a true wide receiver one, but he has very good chemistry built with every receiver, and it almost makes him a little bit better. And them adding Josh Jacobs is one of my favorite free agency signings across the league. I think he's going to put that team over the next level. They also got Xavier McKinney added to their secondary. I think they're going to be a great team, and I do think they're going to win the division this year. And then I have the Lions coming in second place at 10-7. I think the Lions have a very talented roster. I think they got a little lucky in a few games last year. Their schedule is going to look a little more difficult this year. I do still think that they will earn a wild card spot in the playoffs, but I do not see them winning the division this year. I do still think they have a very talented roster, though. Just kind of a quiet free agency. Lost CJ Gardner-Johnson, extended a lot of players, which, is always helpful to do in free agency, but just nothing too crazy to put me over the edge for the Lions this year. Shout out my dogs for just barking the whole time I'm trying to record. And in third place in the NFC North, I have the Chicago Bears coming in at 7-10. I think the Bears will be a fun team to watch. I don't think they're going to be insane or anything. I think Caleb is very talented. I think their roster is very talented, but Caleb Williams is still a rookie, and he's going to have a lot of expectations. I don't think he's going to make the playoffs or anything in year one. I think he's going to be great. Their defense did get a little bit better, but it's not anything to like really, put me over the edge. Montez Sweat is good on their D-line. That's about all on the defense that really excites me. I mean, Kevin Byard was a good signing, but he's definitely out of his prime. I think DeAndre Swift is decent. I think the Eagles O-line made him look a lot better than he actually is. I mean, we saw the same thing with Miles Sanders. So I have the Bears coming in at 7-10. I think they'll be a good team down the line, but I think their division is just going to be pretty competitive this season. And then in last place, I have the Minnesota Vikings coming in at 6-11. It pains me to say it, but I'm not a biased NFL fan. I know what we're capable of. I just don't see this being a very successful season. We have Sam Darnold as our starting quarterback. I think he is going to shock some people. I think he's going to be a little bit better than people are expecting, but not good enough to, go 500 or anything like that. Justin Jefferson has the capabilities of making any quarterback look great, so I do think the offense will still look pretty decent. I think the defense needs to add a few pieces before we're really able to get over that hump and get a playoff spot. And honestly, even if JJ McCarthy stayed healthy this season, I really don't think it would change our record very much. I just don't think we're there yet. I really like our offense. I don't think our defense is there yet. We have a couple things we need to fill out before I can be too excited about this roster. Next up, we have the NFC East, which is one of the most interesting divisions in football. Two of the best teams in the regular season, and we have two of the worst teams, like honestly just historically over the last 10 years. But I do have the Eagles winning the division once again this year, going 12-5. I do have the Eagles starting off 5-0 or 6-0 or something like that. The beginning of their schedule is not too hard, but I do see something similar as to last year happening, where they start off really hot, and then once they start losing towards the end of the season, it just kind of carries over into the playoffs and things like that. Also a team that didn't have too crazy of a free agency, also kind of like the Lions, they just extended a lot of their players. They did just recently acquire Jahan Dotson, so they definitely do have probably the best receiving core in the NFL right now, other than maybe the Bears and a couple other teams. Their defense had some holes last year. Their linebacker play wasn't very good. They did sign Devin White, but I do think Devin White is slightly overrated around the league. I do like that they brought back CJ Gardner-Johnson. I think that will help out their defense a lot, but I mean, Darius Slay is just aging. James Bradbury isn't very good. He's also injured right now, I believe. So I don't know. You lost Hassan Reddick. You did get Bryce Huff, but I do think the defense is going to be playing on about the same level as last season. So I don't see a situation where this team is insane, but I do have them winning the division at 12-5 because their schedule isn't anything too crazy, and they get to beat the Giants and the Commanders twice a year. Second in the division, I have the Cowboys going 11-5. It wouldn't be a Cowboy season if they didn't have an insane regular season. Even with the poor running back play I think they're going to have this year, I think the Cowboys will always be a good team. We're going to compete in the NFC at least in the regular season. I think Zeke and Dalvin Cook will be a decent 1-2 punch. I think it'll be kind of the same thing as Zeke and Tony Pollard. I don't see it being too successful. I think Dalvin Cook does still have a little bit left in him. He didn't really get that much of a chance to prove himself last season, so maybe this is his chance to, you know, ball out, and I think Zeke will be kind of a touchdown merchant. But CeeDee Lamb balled out last year. Dak balls out in the regular season. Deron Bland is out for a few weeks, but I don't really think that's going to matter too much. They still have Micah Parsons. They signed Eric Kendricks. They have Trayvon Diggs back. I don't see them winning the Super Bowl or anything like that, but they still are a talented roster, and they still are the Cowboys, so they're going to have a great regular season. Coming third in the division, I have the Commanders at 5-12. I don't hate the Commanders roster. I think Jaden Daniels will eventually become a good quarterback in the NFL, but he's going to have the rookie jitters. They don't have the best team for him to work with. They just got rid of Jahan Dotson. They don't have Curtis Samuel anymore. So other than Terry McLaurin, I really don't know who he's going to throw the ball to. I think they drafted Luke McCaffrey. Don't quote me on that. I might be being a casual. They did sign Austin Eckler. Brian Robinson was pretty decent last year, but it's not a good enough offense to bring a rookie quarterback over to the next level unless he literally plays like a god, like if he has a CJ Stroud type season. Their defense isn't anything too special either. Their interior D-line is one of the better interior D-lines in the league, but outside of that, there's just not much that impresses me. Not very good pass rushers. They got Bobby Wagner, but Bobby Wagner is so washed and honestly is only good at run defense. He cannot play pass pro whatsoever. They got Jeremy Chin, which is a decent signing. I don't know. I'm just not a big fan of the approach the Commanders took in the offseason. They're almost making signings that you would expect like contending teams to make. I think they also signed Zach Ertz. They just signed like aging players to fill out gaps. Maybe it's just to make Jaden Daniels' first year easier, try to get him developing early. I'm not 100% sure, but I do have them going 5-12. And then last in the division, I have the Giants also going 5-12, which hurts me a little bit to say. I am slightly a Daniel Jones believer, but when you have to play the Eagles and the Cowboys twice a year, that's instantly 4 losses you're going to get, and there's just not many teams around the NFL that the Giants I really see competing with. I think Malik Neighbors is going to show a lot of promise. I think Daniel Jones will play slightly better than people are expecting him to. It's hard to imagine this team winning a bunch of games. You went from Saquon Barkley to Devin Singletary, and even with Saquon Barkley, you weren't really winning games. I hope the Giants do shock me. I hope Malik Neighbors and Daniel Jones build a good connection and they ball out, but I just don't see it happening. I like the defense. The combination of Kayvon Thibodeau and Brian Burns is going to be a problem for a lot of quarterbacks. Then you already have Dexter Lawrence on the interior. Deontay Banks is a young developing corner. They drafted Tyler Nubin. Their draft actually wasn't terrible. I just think, as much as I do believe in Daniel Jones, he's not a quarterback who's going to get you to the playoffs again. I think that was kind of a one-time thing, and they are going to have to eventually move on from Daniel Jones, and I think they paid him too much money too quick. But I hope he proves me wrong because I am a fan of him. Next up, we have the NFC South. I have the Falcons winning the division at 10-7. The Falcons have always been a team to get around 8-9 wins, even with terrible quarterback play. They had Desmond Ridder last year and Taylor Heineke for a little bit, and I think they won 8 games. It may have been 9, but I'm going to say 8. And now they have a quarterback like Kirk Cousins, who is always good in the regular season. He is coming off an Achilles injury, but I still think he is going to play fine. As I'm sure you guys can assume or know, I'm a huge fan of Kirk Cousins. I think he's going to bring this team up to the next level. I think Kyle Pitts is finally going to have a breakout season. I think Drake London's going to have his best season so far. And with a new head coach, Bijan Robinson is about to be one of the better running backs in the NFL, getting the touches that he should be getting. They added some really good pieces to this defense. I know everybody was confused by the Michael Penix pick. I still am a little bit like, if you wanted to take him, you took him too early. That's my problem. But I wanted them to take a pass rusher, but they ended up trading for Matt Judon, who's one of the better pass rushers in the league. They got Justin Simmons out of free agency, so now they probably have the best safety duo in the league. AJ Terrell has showed some promise in the league. I think their defense is going to be better than last year. Their offense is going to be better than last year, and they're finally going to get over that edge, and they're going to win this division. In second place, I also have the Bucs coming in at 10-7. I do unfortunately think they just barely missed the playoffs, even while going 10-7. I know that's probably not very likely, but it's just how this came out. I'm a big fan of Baker Mayfield. He's definitely like one of my favorite players in the NFL. I've been a big fan of OU growing up, so I of course love Baker Mayfield, and I hope he proves me wrong. I hope he does get into the playoffs this year, but 10-7 is obviously not discrediting him or thinking he's going to have a bad year whatsoever. I'm not a big fan of the Bucs defense, if I'm being honest with you. I don't really like their pass rushers. I don't really like their corner group. I mean, their interior D-line's pretty good, and I think Antoine Winfield is probably the best safety in the league. It's between like him, Minka, and Kyle Hamilton. But I like the offense. Mike Evans and Chris Godwin are a great receiver duo. I think Cade Otton showed some promise last year. The O-line has been playing fine, and Rachaad White is definitely one of the better running backs in the league. The defense just in no way impresses me. They're going to have to make some changes to that defense before I have more faith in this team you know, being positive they're going to win the division. But if you're doubting Baker, I promise you he's going to prove you wrong once again. He continues to prove everybody wrong, and I hope he has a great season. Third in the division, I have these Saints coming in at 6-11, and a wild take I actually have going into this year, I think Spencer Rattler will end up becoming the Saints starter in the second half of the season. Derek Carr showed very, very little promise last year. The NFC South is always such a weird division because it's always so competitive, but it's only so competitive because all of the teams in there are so dog shit. I think the Falcons and the Bucks will be good this year, which is what's going to cause the Saints record to be lower than most people would expect. Derek Carr, I used to be a big fan of him on the Raiders. I think, I don't know, once he hit the Saints, it made me realize he's just not it. Chris Olave is pretty good. We haven't really gotten to see his true potential because he hasn't really had like a great quarterback to throw him the ball. Alvin Kamara is aging. I don't think he's the Alvin Kamara he used to be. The O-line has a lot of injury issues, which they did kind of address in the draft, but the offense just does not impress me whatsoever. They do have a good defense. Cam Jordan's a good pass rusher. Demario Davis is a great linebacker. They have a great secondary. Marshawn Lattimore is definitely one of the best corners in the league. Tyrann Mathieu is kind of aging a little bit, but their defense does impress me. Their offense isn't going to be enough to be compatible with how good their defense is going to play, if that makes sense. So I think Derek Carr opens up the year. They hit a point where they're like 3-6, 2-5, and I think they do throw in Rattler, and I think he shows a little bit of promise, but I don't know. I just am not a Derek Carr believer. I hope he proves me wrong. I just don't see that being the case. And then last in the division, I have the Panthers going 4-13. I am not one who believes in Bryce Young. I'm normally not the type to give up on quarterbacks early. I think teams should give them more time to develop, and in no way do I think the Panthers should be benching Bryce Young or moving on from him, you know, within these next couple years. I just personally do not believe in him. I don't think the weapons they got him are much better than what he had last year. I'm really not a fan of Deontay Johnson. He's probably one of my least favorite receivers across the league. They did make the O-line a little bit better, which I do think was a big problem last season, so I do think it'll get them a couple more wins. But the receiving core, I'm just not a fan of. The defense, they lost Brian Burns, they lost Jeremy Chin. You know, I just don't see a situation where the Panthers have Bryce Young and they're a winning team. I don't know. Maybe Bryce Young will prove me wrong one day. I do not believe in him, if I'm being completely honest. But who knows? I could be completely wrong. I do like the pick of Jonathan Brooks. I'm pretty sure he's injured right now, though, so I don't think their running game is going to be very well either. There's just nothing about this Panthers team that really impresses me, if I'm being honest with you. And then probably the best division in the NFC is going to be the NFC West. I have the Niners winning it at 13-4. There's no surprise here. The Niners always have one of the best rosters in the league, and then they always inevitably lose in the playoffs, kind of like the Cowboys. But they do go 13-4. There's really not much to go into. I mean, they extended Brandon Ayuk. They're pretty much going in with like the same team as last year. Drafted Ricky Pearsall. I think he'll make the team a little bit better as well. They did lose Eric Armstead, but I mean, it's really, I just don't see a world where it makes much of a difference, if I'm being honest. I think this team's going to play fine. They're going to be great in the regular season. They're going to be dominant. They're going to get the 1 seed in the NFC once again. So there's really not much to go into there. Second in the NFC West, I have the Rams going 11-6. I do see them getting a wild card spot. I'm a big fan of Stafford. I do think he gets slept on around the league at this point. Throws a few too many interceptions, I'll keep it honest, but I mean, Cooper Kupp, we saw him a couple years ago win the Triple Crown, the Offensive Player of the Year, and the Super Bowl MVP in 1 year, and I think he does still have that in him. But not only that, Puka Nacua is about to have, I mean, I don't even know if we can call it a breakout season after the year he had last year. If there's any receiver who's going to compete with Justin Jefferson on all these awards that he has for, you know, a receiver in their first 3 seasons, it's going to be Puka Nacua. He's about to have one of those Cooper Kupp type years this year, and his connection with Stafford is going to be pretty much unstoppable, I believe. Obviously, their defense is going to look a little bit different. I mean, they had arguably the best defensive player of all time on their roster, and they don't anymore. But I like the Jared Verse pick. I think he's going to be good. They got Tre'Davious White. I think this team's going to be very successful. I don't know if they'll necessarily go far in the playoffs, but I'm a big fan of the Rams. I think they'll have a great regular season, finishing at 11-6. Third place, I have the Seahawks coming in at 8-9. Pretty much like the Seahawks do every year. Good, but not good enough. I think until they move on from Geno Smith, that's pretty much going to be the case. Geno Smith is a good quarterback who's going to win you football games, but he's not a great quarterback who's going to get you playoff wins. Outside of him, I'm a pretty big fan of the offense. The O-line has always had some issues, which they kind of addressed this year. I'm a big fan of Kenneth Walker. He's definitely one of the better running backs around the league, who's super young. JSN hasn't even really had his breakout season yet. We haven't even seen him at his full potential, and I'm a big fan of him. DK Metcalf, I'm not as big of a fan as DK Metcalf as everybody else is, but he's obviously a great receiver. And then Tyler Lockett has been great for like a decade. And defensively, I mean, their defense is interesting. I'm kind of a fan. I think Leonard Williams is good, but he was not worth trading a second round pick for. I've talked about this multiple times on the channel. I like their secondary a lot. Devin Witherspoon is going to be one of the better corners in the league. Tariq Woolen is a great corner. They cut 2 of their safeties this year, but they still have Julian Love. So, I mean, I don't see their defense taking a huge hit from cutting Quandre Diggs and Jamal Adams. I really don't see that being the case. I think they're going to be just about as good as last year as they're going to be this year. And I do think this will probably be Geno's last year as a Seahawks starting quarterback. I do think they move on next year, and we'll see how that goes for them. And then last, I do have the Arizona Cardinals coming in at 7-10. They do get last in the division, but I do think the Cardinals show a lot of promise. I think Kyler Murray is one of the more underrated quarterbacks around the league. We haven't really gotten to see him have a full healthy season in a bit. Was he fully healthy the year before last year? I don't know. I might be being a casual. However, they just drafted him Marvin Harrison, who's one of the better receiver prospects we have seen in a long time. Trey McBride showed a lot of promise last year. James Conner is another super underrated running back in the league. Their O-line does need a little bit of work, I'll give you that, but this team is going to show promise and is going to shock you. One of the big problems is nothing on their defense really impresses me outside of Budda Baker. We'll see how the defense does. We'll see if they do manage to impress me, but I promise you the Cardinals offense will surprise you going into this year. I think they finish around 7-10. Obviously don't make the playoffs, but I do think they show promise, and I think Kyler shows that he earned that contract he got those years ago. And now let's go ahead and hop into the AFC, starting off with probably the best division in football, the AFC North. I have the Ravens winning the division at 13-4. The Ravens are just one of those teams that are always going to be great in the regular season. They added Derrick Henry. They had the best rushing offense in the league last year with Gus Edwards. Now they have Derrick Henry. I mean, there is no way that they happen to get worse. They lost Patrick Queen. They lost Geno Stone. I mean, there's a couple pieces they lost, but this offense is about to be very good. We saw Zay Flowers show his potential last year. They're going to have Mark Andrews for the full season this year. I just don't see a universe where the Ravens get less than like 12 wins this year. So I do have the Ravens winning the division, and I have the Bengals coming in second place in the division at 11-6. If Joe Burrow has a fully healthy season, the Bengals are always going to get 10+ wins, and they're always going to make the playoffs. I mean, Joe Burrow's been in the league for, 4 years, and he's had 2 fully healthy years. One of them he made the Super Bowl, and one of them he made the AFC Championship. Like, if Joe Burrow doesn't get hurt, we're going to see a nasty Bengals team. They're going to keep T. Higgins around for another year. Jamar Chase is probably going to get extended here pretty soon. I am curious how their rushing offense is going to be without Joe Mixon, but I mean, I'm sure Zach Moss is going to do fine. He played pretty good for the Colts last year. And then the Bengals defense isn't anything too crazy, but I do think it's good enough to, keep up with how good their offense is going to be. Yeah, I don't know. The Bengals are just one of those teams, like, no matter what's going on, if they got Joe Burrow, they're going to be pretty good. Joe Burrow is just one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and that's just how football is. If you have one of the best quarterbacks in the league, you're going to win games, and it just comes down to that, if I'm being honest. Third in the division, I have the Browns coming in at 10-7. I'm really not a big fan of the Browns. I just think their defense is going to win them so many games. Deshaun Watson, we don't even really got to get into that. I mean, he got so overpaid. They traded way too much for him. Dude, I'm about to lose my fucking mind. They traded so much for him, and he still has honestly yet to prove that he was even worth it. Has had injury issues, hasn't even played that good when he has been on the field. They're not going to have Nick Chubb at the beginning of the season, but their defense is genuinely so impressive that they're going to be able to win games in their division. They're going to be able to win a lot of games outside of the division, and they're going to be a wild card team. I don't think they make a playoff push or anything. I don't think Deshaun Watson is a playoff winning quarterback anymore. I just think he's past that. But obviously, this Browns defense is just enough to get them so many wins. They definitely have the best defense in the league, and it's just it's insane. And then last in the division, I do have the Steelers coming in at 9-8, which I actually expected to have the Steelers record be a lot lower. I thought this was going to be the first year that the Steelers don't go 500, but after looking through their schedule, they have a decent amount of winnable games, and knowing the Steelers, they will win a couple divisional matches. They always manage to beat the Ravens at least once. I don't know how, but they probably will. I do see a situation where Russ doesn't become the starter by the end of the year. We've seen Russ in a new offense before, and it did not go well. I think he was good for the Broncos in his second year, but I do think, I mean, this is his first season for the Steelers. I think he's going to struggle. However, I do think he's going to bring George Pickens to a different level if he starts to pick up the offense, kind of like he did with Courtland Sutton last season. But I do see a world where it's just kind of mid-quarterback play, and they give Justin Fields a chance, if I'm being honest with you. So we'll see how that goes. But the Steelers are going to once again go 9-8, in my opinion. They will still yet to have a losing season under Mike Tomlin. And now on to the AFC East. And before I made my predictions, I actually thought I had the Jets winning this division. But after going game by game, I actually had the Bills winning the AFC East at 11-6. They don't have Stephon Diggs, but the more I thought about it, like, I almost feel like losing Stephon Diggs is going to elevate Josh Allen. I mean, think about, obviously Josh Allen is better than Jordan Love, but let's think about Jordan Love. He doesn't have like a receiver one, so it almost like opens up his offense to throw whoever he needs to, and I think Josh Allen is kind of going to have that capability and freedom this season. And I think Dalton Kincaid's here for a breakout year. I think Keon Coleman is going to show a lot of promise in his rookie season. The defense did take a hit, but it's kind of like the Bengals. Like, you have Josh Allen as your quarterback, you're going to win a lot of games. And James Cook showed a lot of promise last year. I think they're going to have a great running game once again. And as long as they have Josh Allen at quarterback, they're going to win games, and I do see them winning this division. Second place, I do have the Jets. If everybody on the Jets stays healthy, this is going to be one of the best teams across the league. They made the O-line better for Rodgers. Rodgers is going to be back off of an Achilles tear, but I mean, it's Aaron Rodgers. Breece Hall he's been getting his praise this season, but up until this year, he was like genuinely the most underrated running back in the NFL. God, I'm such a fan of Breece Hall. Like, I love watching Breece Hall. But Garrett Wilson, I'm honestly, like, unpopular opinion, not completely bought in on Garrett Wilson yet. He was supposed to play with Rodgers last year, and he ended up having to play with Zach Wilson, so I will give him the benefit of the doubt. He's probably going to have a great year. They got Mike Williams, who is another injury-prone player, but if he stays healthy, that's going to be a great receiving core. They added Tyron Smith to the O-line, who also is injury prone. But if this team can stay healthy, they're going to be great because they still have that great defense as well. We saw them play good last year. Even without Rodgers there, they had one of the better defenses in the league. So if this defense can play how they did last year with a good offense on the other side of the ball, this is going to be a great team, and they're going to be a problem around the league. Third place in the division, I actually have the Dolphins coming in at 9-8, and they do unfortunately miss the playoffs. The beginning half of the Dolphins schedule is insanely easy, so I do think they're going to have another season like they have like the last 2 years. They're going to start off like 6-0 or something crazy like that, and then they're just going to go on like a course of losing games at the second half of the year, and I think they do end up barely missing the playoffs. This division is going to be competitive with Rodgers back, and I just don't see a situation where the Dolphins make the playoffs. I mean, I did kind of like their draft. I like the pick of Chop Robinson. I just don't, you can call me a hater, I just don't believe in Tua, if I'm being honest. I don't think he was worth the extension he got. I don't think he's going to be a Super Bowl winning quarterback anytime in his career. Again, I hope he proves me wrong. I hope he's great, but I'm not bought in, if I'm being honest. I don't see it. I think Devon Achan's going to have a great year. I think they have one of the best running back duos in the league, but at the end of the day, they're the Dolphins, and they're going to find a way to start off hot and choke the season. And then coming last in the division, I have the Patriots at 4-13. They just don't have the most talented roster. Like, I think that's just known around the league. They are starting Jacoby Brissett, which I don't hate, but I mean, also, like, you use the 3rd overall pick on Drake May. I almost feel like just let him play, but I don't think it's going to matter much in the long run, if I'm being honest. I don't think they're going to win many games. Lost Matt Judon, lost Juju. I mean, they got Ramondre Stevenson, but there's just not much talent on this team for me to be bought in. They're going to go about 4-13. Maybe they get like 5 wins, but there's not going to be a great team. They're going to have a good draft pick next year, and I think they're going to be pretty decent in a few years, but just not right now. Next up, we have the AFC South, which I actually think is going to be a very competitive division this year. I have the Texans winning it at 9-8. The Texans are a great team. They were already a great team and made the team even better by adding Danielle Hunter, Joe Mixon, and Stephon Diggs, but this division is just going to be competitive. I think Stephon Diggs is going to be a little bit of... He's going to get in CJ Stroud's head just a little bit because there are a lot of targets on that team to share the ball with, and we've seen Diggs get upset before about not getting the targets he wants. I think they're going to be a great team, but this division is going to be competitive. I think they're going to split with almost every team in this division, but they will make the playoffs, and they will win the division at 9-8. And then I have the Colts coming second in the division at 9-8. I guess that means they could technically win the division. I do just have the Texans winning it here because I think that's more realistic. I think the Colts will show a lot of promise last year. We're going to get, hopefully, a full season of a healthy Anthony Richardson, who showed a lot of promise at the beginning of the year. Him plus Jonathan Taylor on that offense is going to be nasty in the backfield. Michael Pittman is a great receiver. Josh Downs showed some promise last year. They got A.D. Mitchell in the draft this year, who was honestly kind of a steal. I think Laiatu Latu has a chance to be the defensive rookie of the year. He showed a lot of promise at UCLA, has had some injury issues, but outside of that, I think he's a great pass rusher. Their secondary just really doesn't impress me, which I think is going to be one of the things to hold them back. I expected them to draft a corner last year, but I do think the Laiatu Latu pick still is a great pick, and I think they're going to show a lot of promise this year, and they're going to be very talented in years to come. I think they're just going to barely miss the playoffs once again this season. Coming third in the division, I have the Jags at 7-10. Last season, before the season started, I literally told everybody that Trevor Lawrence was going to win MVP and that the Jags were going to win the division, and it started off looking like that for a bit. Maybe not Trevor Lawrence winning MVP, but they started off like 8-3 or something last year and somehow missed the playoffs. How do you start off 8-3 and miss the playoffs? I don't even know how that's possible. But after that, I will never have faith in the Jags again. I don't even really like their free agency. You signed Gabe Davis, who Now you just have like 3 wide receiver 2s. I don't know. You can try to explain it. I don't get it. Travis Etienne's very talented. Trevor Lawrence is very talented. They got Eric Armstead in free agency, but I don't know. You also drafted Trayvon Walker above Aiden Hutchinson those years ago. I don't know. I don't think you'll ever be able to explain that one to me, but Josh Allen is a great pass rusher. He's, definitely one of the better pass rushers in the league, but just after last season, I'm not about it on the Jags, and I'm not going to make the same mistake I did last year. So I have the Jags going 7-10, coming third in the division. And then I have the Titans going 4-13. I think they're going to be one of the worst teams in the league, if I'm being honest. Will Levis had his one crazy game last year, got the starting job, and then honestly kind of fell off from there. They don't have Derrick Henry anymore. They replaced him with Tony Pollard, who we saw get the opportunity to be a #1 back last year for the Cowboys and just wasn't very good at all. I think he's going to be splitting snaps with Tyjae Spears, but I really don't think it's going to matter much. I also really don't like their receiving core. DeAndre Hopkins is kind of old and washed. Calvin Ridley didn't show much promise last year. Is their number 3 going to be Tyler Boyd or Treylon Burks? I mean, Tyler Boyd was great for the Bengals, but that's with Joe Burrow. And then Treylon Burks just never really showed much promise in the NFL. Defense is okay. Like, Jeffrey Simmons is very talented. They did sign Jamal Adams, which, I mean, he's a little past his prime. The L'Jarius Sneed signing was very good. I think the Titans do have bright years in the future. I don't see Will Levis being the quarterback to get them there, though, if I'm being completely honest. And then last but not least, we have the AFC West. Big shocker, the Chiefs win it, going 12-5. Mahomes is about to have one of his best, statistical years ever. We saw him go insane last year with very little receiver talent. Rashee Rice was going off at the end of the year, even in the playoffs, but now they added Marquise Brown. They drafted Xavier Worthy. This defense was beautiful last year, and they kept it together for the most part. Obviously, they lost L'Jarius Sneed, but I mean, the defense is still mostly together, and if that defense can play as good as they played last year, Mahomes is about to have a 40 touchdown type of year. I genuinely he's going to be so insane. He has so many weapons to work with. Pacheco's going to have another great year. Still have one of the better O-lines in the league. I mean, it's Patrick Mahomes. He's obviously going to win the division. They go 12-5. Second place, I have the Chargers going 8-9. I think Jim Harbaugh is going to be the main reason this team honestly even gets close to 8 wins. I don't think Herbert is a top 5 quarterback in the league like people say he is, especially now that he's not really going to have any receivers to throw to. I mean, Ladd McConkey was a pretty good draft pick, but I just I don't see this team being very successful. I think they're going to be more of a run-heavy team this year, and I think Jim Harbaugh is going to make that defense look a lot better because they've always been good on paper but never really performed very well. I think Jim Harbaugh is going to take this team slowly to the next level, but this season they're not going to make the playoffs or anything. They don't have the offensive talent to do so, in my opinion. Raiders go 6-11. I honestly think the Raiders are going to surprise some people this year. The only thing holding them back is they just don't have a quarterback. I mean, Gardner Minshew showed last year that he is capable of winning games, but I mean, it's just, he's not going to get you to the playoffs or win you any playoff games or anything like that. Lost Josh Jacobs. Devontae Adams is, of course, going to put up numbers because he's Devontae Adams. Max Crosby is, of course, going to put up numbers. That D-line's going to be crazy with him and Christian Wilkins. I think their defense as a whole is going to be very good. I do really like their new head coach. But, I mean, when you have Gardner Minshew as your starting quarterback, who's probably going to be ending up sharing snaps with Aiden O'Connell at some point, it's just not very promising. I do see a situation where they win more than 6 games. I could see them even winning up to 8 games. But they're not going to be making the playoffs or anything. I think they're going to have to draft a quarterback next year before they start getting taken seriously. And then the Broncos I also have going 4-13, coming last in the division. I don't think Bo Nix is terrible, but I don't really see a situation where he's great. I mean, he has Cortland Sutton to throw to. Marvin Mims is a decent receiver. Javonte Williams, he just had some injury issues. The defense isn't too crazy. I mean, Pat Surtain's one of the better corners in the league, but you cut Justin Simmons. There's just nothing about the defense that impresses me. I don't see a situation where this team gets more than 5-6 wins. So I have the Broncos going 4-13 and being one of the worst teams in the league. And with all of those records, we can determine the seed for each team and what the playoff bracket would look like, and this is where it gets fun. So in the NFC, the Niners would be the 1 seed in the NFC, the 2 seed would go to the Eagles, the 3 seed would go to the Packers, and the 4 seed would go to the Falcons. For the wild cards, the 5 seed would go to the Cowboys, the 6 seed would go to the Rams, and the 7 seed would go to the Lions. In the NFC, the Eagles would then take on the Lions. I actually do see the Lions winning that playoff game. After what the Eagles did in the playoffs last year, I just don't have high hope for them in the playoffs. I think the Lions could definitely squeak out a win against them. So I have the Lions upsetting the Eagles in the wild card round. You'd have the Packers taking on the Rams. As much of a fan I am of the Rams, I just think the Packers are going to have a great year. I have a lot of hope in them, so I do think the Packers win that wild card game against the Rams. And then the Falcons and the Cowboys have the better roster, but it's the Cowboys in the playoffs, and I'm never going to pick them to win a playoff game again. So I actually do have the Falcons beating the Cowboys and advancing to the divisional round. Then in the NFC divisional round, you have the 1 seed 49ers taking on the 7 seed Lions. I do think the 49ers win this game. I think it'll be similar to last year. I think it'll be close, but I think the Niners will just have the better play calling, have the better decision making, have the better, just game, and they're going to end up winning that game. And you have the Packers taking on the Falcons. I think the Packers pretty easily win that game. I think the Falcons really didn't deserve to be in the divisional round, but I'm never going to pick the Cowboys to win a game. I mean, the Packers beat them last year, and nobody expected that to happen. So that would bring the 49ers and the Packers playing in the NFC Championship, and I actually am going to pick the Packers to win this game. The Packers were this close to beating the 49ers in the divisional game last year. Jordan Love was the reason they lost the game. He did throw a crossbody interception. He pulled a Brett Favre, but I mean, after that happened, there is 0% chance he ever makes that mistake again. And with an even better roster, I don't see a reason they won't be able to beat the 49ers in the playoffs. So I actually have the Green Bay Packers making the Super Bowl here in 2025. And then in the AFC, the Ravens are going to be the 1 seed once again. The Chiefs will get the 2 seed. The Bills will get the 3 seed. And the Texans will be the 4 seed. The 5 seed would be the Bengals. The 6 seed would be the Browns. And the 7 seed would be the Jets. The Chiefs would take on the Jets. And I think the Chiefs do end up beating the Jets in the playoffs. It's Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs. I'm sorry, Rodgers. You're just not going to beat them. And then the Bills would take on the Browns. I do think the Bills end up winning that game. I think the Browns have a talented defense, but I think Josh Allen's good enough to make the defense look not so talented. And then the Texans versus the Bengals. I actually do have the Bengals beating the Texans. The Texans are in for a promising year, but I just think Joe Burrow is unstoppable in the playoffs, so I do have the Bengals winning that game. Meaning in the divisional, the 1 seed Ravens would take on the 5 seed Bengals. I think the Bengals win that game. I think the Ravens are very talented, but they never play good in the playoffs, and they never play good against their division opponents, and the Bengals, once again, are just almost unstoppable in the playoffs. So I'm going to take the Bengals to beat the Ravens in the divisional round, and then the Bills would take on the Chiefs. Not much thought has to go into that one. The Chiefs own the Bills in the playoffs, and not only that, the Bills have a slightly worse roster this year, and they lost last year with a slightly better roster. So the Chiefs do win that game, meaning we once again have a Bengals-Chiefs AFC Championship, and I have the Bengals winning it this year. Pat Mahomes finally got Burrow's number that 1 year, but I do still think the Bengals slightly own the Chiefs, and I do think they beat them in this AFC Championship. The Chiefs are unfortunately not going to three-peat, and we're gonna have a Packers-Bengals Super Bowl, which I do think the Bengals win, and I think Joe Burrow is going to be your Super Bowl MVP in 2025. And then last but not least, let's get into my award predictions. I do think MVP this year is going to be Patrick Mahomes. He's going to get another MVP. He has so many weapons to throw to. He gets to beat up on the Broncos, the Chargers, the Raiders twice a year each. I think he's going to put up crazy stats all season, and I think he's going to get an MVP. He won't three-peat, but I mean, he'll get another MVP and just keep adding to his GOAT status. Offensive Player of the Year, I'm actually going to give to Puka Nacua. I really just see a situation where he has a Cooper Kupp type year and leads the league in receptions, gets a bunch of touchdowns. I think he's going to just have an insane year. I think he almost could have co-split the Rookie of the Year last year with CJ Stroud. He was so impressive. Defensive Player of the Year, I'm going to give to TJ Watt. He's just always competing for the award, so I just didn't want to put too much thought into it. I think he's always going to compete for the award. He's always going to be like top 3 in the league in sacks, and I see him winning Defensive Player of the Year this year, if I'm being honest. Offensive Rookie of the Year doesn't take much thought. I'm just going to go with Caleb Williams. He's definitely one of the best prospects out of the draft between him and Marvin Harrison, but Caleb Williams is a quarterback, so he's going to put up stats a lot easier than Marvin Harrison will be able to. Defensive Rookie of the Year, I'm actually going to give to Jared Verse for the Rams. I think there's a lot of players that could win it. I think Laiatu Latu has a chance. I think Dallas Turner has a chance. I think Chop Robinson has a chance, but I see it going to Jared Verse. The Rams are very good at drafting. They haven't had a first-round pick since Jared Goff, so who knows? Maybe they finally got a first-round pick, and he's going to end up being terrible, or he could end up being great here and winning Defensive Rookie of the Year, which I think is going to be the case. And your Comeback Player of the Year is going to be Aaron Rodgers. I mean, who else are they going to give it to? I mean, they could give it to Kirk Cousins, but I think Aaron Rodgers puts up better numbers than Kirk Cousins, if I'm being honest. And that is my 2024-25 NFL predictions. If you disagree with any of my takes, if you think I'm a casual on anything, feel free to let me know in the comments. I don't know. I think I was pretty realistic. I think I was pretty unbiased. But, you could disagree with me. Feel free to let me know anything you disagree with in the comments. And maybe at the end of the season, I'll come back to this video, see how terrible some of my takes were, or see how great some of my takes were. I'm excited for NFL season to get started. Today is Monday, so we are 3 days away from the first NFL game of the 2024 season. I cannot wait. I think the Ravens are going to win the game against the Chiefs, but thank you for watching. If you made it this far, I love you. This is a different type of video, but I hope you guys enjoyed regardless. Thank you for coming. Deuces. And I'm tweaking with